hope you would take time to read the details of that session and be able to answer some very meaningful questions which may be asked based on that particular session. Now we look at session 5, and this has to deal with the beginning of our discussion of the basic structure. We're going to be looking at the political, the religious, and economic institutions in this particular session. We'll look at the rest of the institutions in the subsequent sessions. The basic structure, I attempted to explain that much earlier, is in response to the attainment of basic needs in an orderly fashion. This is the major function of the basic structure. Now, imagine the various needs that we have. If we do not have the regulation of how we attain them, there will be total chaos in any society. A lot of times when you ask students what are the basic needs of people, they mention things like food, clothing, shelter. We have much more abundant basic needs than just those three. In fact, those three constitute just one basic area of need, that is the economic need. So there are 6 basic needs as identified by both sociologists and psychologists in terms of the human behavior. The first one is the need to express our freedom, in response to which we have the political institution. Assumption being that if you express your freedom ends where your neighbor's nose begin. You don't express a freedom without any kind of control. Assuming I find you in the street and I feel like punching you on the nose, I can go ahead and do that because I'm expressing my freedom. But that is unacceptable. And that is the reason why there must be a political system which seeks to maintain law and order and to assign power and position to people in a society. Then we have the need to allay our fears of the unknown or of the mystical. In response to it, we have the religious institution. There are a lot of things that we do not understand, a lot of things that we are afraid of. So we have the religious institution which enables us to regulate our relationship with the supernatural. We have the satisfaction of hunger, in response to which we have the economic institution. Can you imagine a situation where a large number of people are hungry and suddenly there's food presented? Some balls of kenke and some fish and shito. You can imagine how people are going to struggle to get that food because they're starving. And in the process, those who are not strong enough to be able to reach out to the food, they will be destroyed, and the stronger people will survive. That is the survival of the fittest. Human beings do not want to live like animals, and that's the reason why we have the economic institution, which is responsible for the production and the equitable distribution of goods and services, so that once the goods are there, everyone should have access to it in terms of the equitable distribution. We have the sex drive, satisfaction of the sex drive. Well, I explained the last time that God has created a man and a woman, and there is a very strong attraction between the two. In response to this satisfaction of sex drive, we have the marriage institution. If the marriage institution were not there, you would find that the streets in the urban community and even in the villages would be like the jungle, where if you feel like satisfying your sex drive and you see a girl who you admire, you simply grab her, and there and then in the street you make love to her, just like goats would do, just like cocks and hens would do, just like dogs would do in the streets. That is how we would behave as human beings, but fortunately we have the marriage and family institution which regulates our sex drive. In addition to that, we have the educational institution, which regulates the attainment or the gratification of our vanity. Vanity refers to the dream that we have as young people. You dream to become a professor, you dream to become a doctor or a lawyer, that dream is only attainable through the educational institution. And finally, we have healthcare institution, which is very critical, and indeed it is the very first prerequisite. Even the scriptures, as I said much earlier, God says that above everything else, he wants you to be in good health and to be prosperous. If you don't have good health, there's nothing that he can do. Now, the need for the orderly attainment of these institutions, which is what led to the social structures in which the political institution, the religious institution, the economic institution, the marriage and family institution, as well as the educational healthcare institutions, they constitute the social structure. Basically speaking, they constitute society. According to Hobbes, Thomas Hobbes, the English philosopher, in the absence of these controls provided by the social institutions, man will live in a state of nature, governed by his reason in the service of his passions. These passions are the desire for gain, safety, reputation, and glory, which are basically some of the needs that I expressed much earlier. Now, he says that to be able to achieve these passions, we need power, because power is the ability to achieve your goal even at the resistance of others. So there's a constant search for power in a state of nature. In other words, in the absence of social control provided by the social institutions, a constant search for power and for more power to secure the power we already have. So basically, society becomes a place of a state of a war of all against all, in which the life of the individual, according to Hobbes, would be solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Now, we're focusing now on the political institution as a part of our discussion on the basic structure. Now, the function, as I explained much earlier, is the maintenance of law and order and the assignment of power and positions to people in a society. Without the political institution, there will be total chaos. There will be a state of nature in the urban communities. If you imagine the large number of people who inhabit the urban areas, without any kind of rules, there will be total chaos. Now, some of the sources of disorder in the urban communities include poverty, psychic overload, proximity of people in the urban community living very close to one another, and then over-urbanization. Now, poverty, you can very easily explain. If you are in an urban area like Accra or in Kumasi, you would find that there are certain so-called inner city areas where the poor predominantly reside. And those areas, because it is inhabited by poor people, and the poor people, remember, are the jobless people in the urban community. And how do they survive? They survive on a lot of illegal dealing. They survive on crime. Armed robbery may be found in the inner city areas, and other deals like drugs, prostitution, all of those things are to be associated with poverty. So poverty can create a lot of disorder in the urban communities. Overload, if you remember the theory that we discussed earlier, Milgram's theory of psychic overload, when a person is experiencing overload, basically what he does is the conservation of psychic energy. In other words, he sets priorities. He tells himself that I'm going to town, and what I'm going to do today is number 1, number 2, number 3. And he does not want any kind of interference in his ability to achieve those goals for the day. So you would find that people in the urban areas experiencing overload are constantly intolerant. If you frustrate them, they have no hesitation in slapping you. In other words, overload has a predisposition of making people very superficial in their interactivity. They're very impersonal, and they are transitory. And that is not a situation which augurs very well for orderly behavior in the urban communities, because quarrels can result and fights can result as a result of people conserving psychic energy from overload. Proximity is a situation where in the urban area you find that people are living close to one another because of the lack of space. Now what happens? Your next door neighbor, he loves his music very loud. And you are the quiet type. You want the quietness to be able to read your stuff and plan for the next day. But here is your neighbor who is, playing music at a very high level. And he complains, he doesn't stop. He complains, he doesn't stop. The possibility of some kind of altercation arising is predictable. So even proximity, and sometimes it is our children who live in my house straying over to another house who are going to cause some trouble there. And there will be a misunderstanding between neighbors in an area where proximity is predominant. So proximity too could be a factor for social disorder, which requires controlling. Then we can speak about over-urbanization, which simply means the inability of the urban areas to economically cater for the migrants. And what does that mean? It simply means unemployment. And if you're unemployed, there are all kinds of problems that are associated. Crime could be an adaptation for you as a way of surviving. Prostitution could be an adaptation for you if you came to the urban area looking for jobs and you can't get some. We can talk about juvenile delinquency, streetism, a lot of other factors which are associated with the absence of job or absence of employment in the urban areas predominantly constitute the significant social problems in the urban community. And these are some of the reasons why the political institution is there. Now, who is in charge of maintaining law and order in terms of all of these chaos, if you like, or potential chaos in the urban community? It is not a chief. If you're in Accra, it is not the Garman chair. Or if you're in Kumasi, it is not the Otunfo who is in the streets directing traffic or doing other things in terms of maintaining law and order. It is the mayor. The mayor is appointed by the government, but the mayor does not go into the street to maintain law and order on his own. He relies on the police. Who are the police? You find them all over the place in the urban community. Their main functions are the protection of life, limb, and property in public and private places. That is the definition, basically, is a body, a peace preservation body, whose main functions are to protect life, limb, and property in public and private places. In performing their roles in the urban community, the police require power, the ability to achieve your goal, even at the resistance of others. They need that power. But their power is legitimate power. Power can be considered in two segments. We have legitimate power, which equals authority, and we have illegitimate power, which equals coercion. The police have legitimate power, or they have authority. Assuming you're driving down the street and suddenly some guy comes in the middle of the road and raises his hands as though he's stopping you, you may have to decide whether you want to stop or not, because that's just a guy. You don't recognize him to have the power to stop you. But if he was a policeman who raised a hand, you would immediately stop, because you recognize the power of the police to stop you. That is authority. Now, illegitimate power or illegal power, which equals coercion, is what could be exercised by an armed robber, for example, who enters your house and pulls out a knife or pulls out a gun and says, give me that, or, and then you have to give him whatever he's asking for, and it takes it away. Now, that